All right, Larry Krueger here from the Pig and a Pickle Krug Show with a little 49er video, a reaction to Kyle Shanahan's Monday press conference. But first, Pig and a Pickle, two locations, Emeryville and Corte Madera. They're open 7 days a week in both spots from 11 a.m. till 8 p.m. or until they run out. Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. Get the brisket chili. Go say hi to Damon and Mary and tell them that Larry Krueger sent you. All right, Kyle Shanahan spoke to the media for the first time today since the 49ers lost to the Cleveland Browns yesterday. And, of course, he always starts by talking about the injuries. Trent Williams' ankle sprain is a low ankle sprain. They're going to have to see his status later this week. Christian McCaffrey, they're still waiting for final results on his injuries. It could be an oblique injury or a rib injury or both. George Odom also has an injury. He's day-to-day, and I don't remember what it was, but Deebo Samuel's injury is the shoulder. He is day-to-day. His status for the Vikings next week is still TBD. Kyle told us that Deebo Samuel was hit on the very first play of the game on the jet sweep, and he was hit just right, and it brought him some pain. 7 or 8 plays later, they decided that he couldn't go, and that did it for his day. So his status for Minnesota is still up in the air. Kyle was asked about Jim Schwartz, and obviously Jim Schwartz has got a great record against Kyle Shanahan. In fact, he's 9-1 against Shanahan. And the question was, what did Schwartz do specifically to make Brock Purdy's job tougher? And Shanahan went into the fact that, they played an aggressive man-to-man coverage, and then also kind of, said that it was a little self-inflicted from the standpoint that only 2 drives, Niners only had 2 drives that they didn't have a negative play. I think the first drive and probably the final drive of the day were the only drives they didn't have a negative play. So he made it seem like maybe to some degree, the 49ers had a hand in their own demise. But he said an aggressive man-to-man coverage. And then, of course, we know the talent, right? Myles Garrett, Zadarius Smith, Dalvin Tomlinson was huge up front, Denzel Ward, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. Cleveland had a number of outstanding performances from their defense. It is the number 1 defense in football. And Kyle just kind of expressed that, hey, look, you fall behind the chains to a number 1 defense in football, and it's going to be tough. And it was tough. But he did say they played an aggressive man-to-man coverage and that made things tougher. Kind of credited Purdy for how he dealt with it. But, when you fall behind on the chains and the other team's got the number 1 defense, great personnel, and you don't have clean drives, and they're playing real strong man-to-man coverage, makes for a long day at the office is basically what Kyle said to that question. Kyle was asked about the run defense, the Niners' run defense. The Niners came into the game giving up about 65 yards a game rushing and gave up 160 on the ground to the Browns without Nick Chubb, 4.7 yards per carry. And Kyle admitted that he was very disappointed in the Niner run defense. He said it was our most missed tackles in a game this year. He said, we played a lot of 2-shell defenses, but basically pointed out that the Browns got to the edges of the 49er defense with ease and that they didn't do a good enough job setting the edge in this defense and against the Browns run game. So obviously the Niners obviously did not take away the run, and the run burned them. I mean, to me, if you said what are the number 1 reasons the Niners lost the game, they could not run it themselves after that first drive, and they couldn't stop Cleveland's run the way they have stopped other teams' run games all year long. So Kyle expressed disappointment in the run D and didn't say any changes are afoot, but didn't run from the fact that the 49ers did not have a good run defensive performance, gave up 4.7 a carry, gave up 160 yards to a team that the last 2 weeks hadn't gotten 100 yards, and really were struggling to run the ball themselves since Nick Chubb went out. But they did not. They ran the ball successfully against the 49ers, and Shanahan expressed disappointment in that. Kyle was asked if there was any word from the NFL on some of the controversial calls, the Tayshaun Gibson call on the personal foul, or even the P.J. Walker, incomplete pass, intentional grounding, as opposed to did he fumble on the ball that Bosa wound up with at the 10-yard line. And he said that they have, appealed to the league or whatever, filed paperwork or talked to the league. They've done what they normally do, which is complain to the league when there are controversial calls, and the Niners have done that. And they're still waiting to hear back from the league on those controversial calls, but it all amounts to nothing. It's like, what's the league going to say? And that he basically referenced that as well. It's like, yeah, we do this and they do that. And it's a little formality tap dance, and maybe they'll get some clarification. But at the end of the day, who the hell cares? It doesn't change anything. It changes nothing about the outcome of the game or really anything going forward. So that's just kind of a formality. He talked about Jake Moody's misses, and he was asked, hey, is there any common denominator in Jake Moody's field goal misses? And he said, no, not really. He missed the first one. He hooked it left, and he missed the second one. He pushed it right. And Kyle said that, he asked this exact question to Brian Schneider, the 49ers special teams coach, on their flight back from Cleveland, and they didn't seem to feel like there was any common thread in Jake's misses, other than to say they still believe in Jake and it's good experience for Jake. And he basically just took the high road there on Jake Moody. He said it was overall good experience. He said they've got to do a better job of helping him out with shorter field goals, like at the beginning when they had to kick from 54. Obviously, that's a tall ask to ask somebody to make a 54-yard field goal. The 41-yard field goal, he didn't comment at all about, whether he could have called another play or whether he should have called another play. They had a timeout. They had time. They probably could have called another play and got a little closer. He wasn't asked about that. But he did say overall it was good experience for Jake, and they're maintaining support for Jake Moody. So Matt Mayoko asked him, did you guys consider staying east between the Cleveland game and the Minnesota game? But the Minnesota game is not until next Monday, so they had an extra day. So they figured, you know what, they'll fly back. He said the bigger concern now is the time between the Minnesota game and the Cincinnati game. And, really the same thing that happened in this game is going to happen in that Cincinnati game in 2 weeks, which is the 49ers are going to be operating on somewhat of a short week. I mean, they played Sunday night last week against Dallas. Cleveland had a bye. This week, they're going to play Minnesota on a Monday night, so that means they're going to have one less day to prepare for Cincinnati. Cincinnati will be coming off a bye. So the Niners will be traveling back from Minnesota off a short week, and the Bengals will be on some 13-day break. So it's going to be that Bengals game is going to be majorly challenging. And he said, they looked at it and they thought about it, but they just said, hey, with this game against Minnesota being a Monday, they have that extra day to prepare. And so that was the determining factor in them not staying somewhere east or Midwest during this week. So that's why they decided to come back. But he said there is a little greater concern going into that Cincinnati game. Kyle was asked about Darrell Luter Jr., and he didn't really have any specifics on Luter other than he's getting closer and should be back within a few weeks. So that's good news because, anytime you can get another good young corner back in the mix, that's always a good thing. He was asked about Randy Gregory, and he just gave him a positive review. Said he thought Gregory really did a nice job. The fact of the matter is they only got him in their building the previous Wednesday. He had very little practice time. He got a sack on a stunt. He made a nice tackle for a loss against the run. And Kyle had a very positive review of Gregory and just had good things to say about him. Kyle was asked about where his trust is in Jordan Mason because, let's be honest, with the injury to CMC, the Niners may have to lean on Jordan Mason this week against the Minnesota Vikings. And it's interesting, when he was asked about his trust in Jordan Mason, he immediately started talking about his trust in Elijah Mitchell. So it sounds like Mitchell, in Kyle's mind, is the next man up. And whether he's healthy or not, that will, I guess, determine if Mason then becomes the next man up. But they don't have the status report yet on CMC. They don't know if Christian's going to be ready for Minnesota or not. Said that he liked Jordan Mason and has confidence in him. But I did think it was interesting. What is your trust level in Jordan Mason? And immediately he starts talking about Elijah Mitchell. So it almost is like, hey, you know what? There's a clear delineation of the pecking order here. It's McCaffrey's your 1, Mitchell's your 2, Mason's your 3, Ty Davis Price, we also mentioned, is the 4. But it sounds like Mitchell will get the first run next week if CMC can't go, then Mason, then Ty Davis Price, and they haven't changed their order as far as how they view their running backs. It's definitely in that order: McCaffrey, then Mitchell, then Mason, then Davis Price. He was asked about the first and the last drive, and Kyle said, "Hey, he felt like the first drive and the last drive were the Niners' 2 best drives of the day. You know, they ran the ball exclusively on their first drive, then scored on the shuffle pass to the shovel pass from Purdy to McCaffrey, and then the last 2 drives just talked about how, or the last drive, I should say, he also felt was a good drive, and Brock got him in position to make the field goal, and they just didn't make it. So, didn't sound any worse for wear, but there you go. There's a little wrap on the 49er Kyle Shanahan Monday presser. Some interesting nuggets in there for sure. Thanks to Pig and a Pickle for being the title sponsor of The Krug Show. Thanks to all you guys for supporting The Krug Show on YouTube.